Good evening, everybody. Our internet is down, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to record another review, though I won't be able to post it until tomorrow. Lately, I've been rewatching a show that I liked when it was originally on. I do not believe that I saw the entire series because it was on Saturday nights, and they kept changing the time, and it was kind of hard to find where it was, and I started going out a bit more, and I really didn't finish all of it. But it's a Dark Skies from 1996 to 1997. It was written and created by Bryce, Zabel, and Brent Friedman, and mostly written by them as well. It starred Eric Close, Megan Ward, J.T. Walsh, Tim Kelleher, Connor O'Farrell, Charlie Lang, and Jeri Ryan. And a lot of people, it was produced by Sony slash Columbia, and it was aired on NBC. It was looked at as NBC's answer to the X-Files, which is not really a fair assessment. They're really two sort of different, very different things. They're really, yes, there are similar themes in that Dark Skies deals with an alien conspiracy and, shadowy government organizations and that sort of thing. But it's not like the X-Files in that A, these people are not FBI agents, and B, it does not have the diversity of subject matter that the X-Files would do shows about monsters, they do shows about serial killers, they do shows about other things. The conspiracy was not the main well, it was the main stay, but it wasn't. They didn't show it every week. They did different things. In contrast, Dark Skies focused strictly on this one plot, which is that a guy named John Loengard, played by Eric Close, and his girlfriend Kim Sayers, played by Megan Ward, moved to Washington, D.C. from somewhere in the Midwest, and he is going to take a job working for a congressman, and one of the things the congressman wants him to do is to investigate which projects he should continue putting money into. One of those being Project Blue Book, the Air Force's investigation of UFOs. And his wife gets a job working through a connection, through a friend, working for Jackie Kennedy. And so she's working in the First Lady's office. Through a series of incidents, he does he goes and interviews some of the people who've seen UFOs, again, to get kind of just an overall assessment. Is this worth investing in? And he interviews, for instance, Betty and Barney Hill, obviously before their hypnotherapy, because they only talk about the UFO experience, not the abduction, which they added later on to their testimony. But even that he's being wiretapped, and he doesn't realize it. And after he finishes this interview, which is fairly brief, he's beaten up by these kind of men in black types. They're not actually wearing black suits, but they're men in suits, and he doesn't know who they are, and their faces are hidden. He just hears one of them called the Colonel, and they really kind of beat the crap out of him and tell him, next time, we may make a family visit, so keep your nose out of our business. This kind of pisses him off, and he makes him investigate who could possibly this character be called the Colonel. And through investigation and doggedness, he comes up with a guy by the name of Frank Bach, who was at the exchange of prisoners when Francis Gary Powers, who, as we know, was shot down by the Soviets flying a U-2 spy plane. There's an alternate take on that, by the way, which I'm not going to spoil for you. But it turns out there was something else that he was chasing. It wasn't he wasn't just spying. He was chasing something. And he starts seeing this character Frank Bach in different documents. I think he eventually connects him to the Roswell crash in 1947. And now he realizes that he is a member of this secret organization called Majestic 12, or Magic, MAJIC 12, who are advisors to the president, and they are responsible basically for keeping the UFO secret from the public. That's their presidency, and he is offered entry into MJ12. And at first he accepts because he's interested. He wants to know. Well, what he finds out kind of shocks him, that there are these entities who are simply known as Hive or the Hive, and they infiltrate people they use this kind of disgusting sort of scorpion-like arachnid that enters either through your mouth, your nose, or your ears, and it wraps itself around your spinal column and starts taking over, turning you into basically a puppet for the hive. Will do whatever they want you to do. This again is like the Invaders. It's, aliens as communists. They could be anybody. They could be the guy next door. Obviously a Cold War thread runs through this, as it did with the Invaders, which Larry Cohen rapidly admitted, and I think Bryce Zabel also admitted that. There's unfortunately it was canceled after only one season, but Bryce Zabel and Brent Friedman had actually written a 5-year story arc. There were going to be 5 separate stories, and they were going to link up in the 5th year finally. And unfortunately that didn't happen. It was canceled because it had consistently low ratings. NBC put it in a death spot. They put it in Saturday nights at 8 p.m. It was skewed to young people. Well, young people aren't in most of the time Saturday nights at 8 p.m. If they put it on a bit later, 11, 12, then they might have had a bigger audience share. It's still a good show. It was well produced. Some of the effects look a bit cheesy now, but the body horror is actually pretty good and really kind of creepy. A couple of very strange things happened. I just recently watched an interview, which was only done last month, with Bryce Zabel on the Y Files. That's Y as in the letter Y. I don't know if you haven't seen that. That's a really good show. It's hosted by this guy named AJ and this animated fish called Hecklefish, who is really, really funny and says funny things. But he also has a podcast. The podcast does not include Hecklefish, which is unfortunate because I like Hecklefish. But anyway, it's just called The Basement. And he was interviewing Bryce Zabel for almost 3 hours. And it's not a boring 3 hours. It's very interesting. And a couple of things he said about the production of the show are fascinating. One, when they were making the show, they made a 2-hour pilot, and they pretty much, in 1996, they pretty much had it in the can. And then at the same time that they were producing this, Sony Pictures, who was also produced the show, was also producing the first Men in Black movie. Well, the lawyers for Men in Black came over to him and Friedman and said, with this list of 19 things that were not, quote-unquote, non-negotiable, that they had to comply with, or they were going to file a lawsuit and try to stop the production. They couldn't have any men dressed in black because the Men in Black was going to have that. They could not have an elevator that went to the secret organization because Men in Black had that. They couldn't have a farmer because Men in Black had a farmer. So they had to go back and do 11 days of reshoots to reshoot the pilot so that it conformed to these specifications. They couldn't have MJ-12 be in Washington, D.C., because again, Men in Black was going to do that. So they put it in Virginia instead. So it caused them to do these reshoots. The second unusual thing that happened, a couple of things. One, Bryce Zabel received at his house 2 postcards. On one side, they just had a picture of a science fiction book cover. On the other side, there was only an address from Nevada, no, person's name, and the words typed vertically, "We are watching you." He got 2 of those. Never knew where they came from. Then he had a rat. They finished making this reshot pilot, and they were having a rat party at his house up in the Hollywood Hills somewhere, and there were lots of people there. There's like 200 people. There's the whole production crew and the staff and cinematographer and the editor and everybody. And he saw a guy he didn't recognize, and he walked up to him and said, "Hi, I'm Bruce Zabel. I'm the producer of the show, and how are you? And I don't recognize you. Can you please tell me who you are?" And he says, "Well, I can't really tell you my name. You can call me JC," which was a little bit unusual. And he said, "I really like the show, and we've seen some of your scripts." He said, "You've seen the scripts? How did you get the scripts? Because the scripts had not been released yet." I said, "Well, we have some people working in Hollywood, and we really like what you're doing, and we want to let you know that you got a lot of things right." He said, "What do you mean you got things right?" He said, "Well, for one thing, you got the Barney and Betty Hill case right. You got the Roswell crash right. You got some of the specific incident, the McMinnville photographs. You got that bit right. You didn't get the thing with the ganglion. We thought that was disgusting. That's not the way they do it. They use implants to control people. He said, it's not, it doesn't take over your brain or anything. So, but we understand that that's fiction. He says, who's we? And he wouldn't really elaborate. And he said, listen, I appreciate that you like the show, and I'm pleased that you have these opinions, but I don't know who you are, and I'd really like you to leave. And so he starts to, the guy walked away, and then he went over to his partner, Brent Friedman, and he noticed a few minutes, or like 20 minutes later, he's talking to Friedman, about the same thing. Now he's getting a little pissed off, and he insists that the guy leaves. Will you agree to meet with my friend? My friend's name is the captain, and he's also very interested. I think he'd have some nice things to say, about this, and you might want to talk with him. He's an interesting guy. And he said, oh, okay. He agrees to meet with this guy. And like a week or so later, they meet again at Zabel's house. And this guy who was just called the captain he is military appearing, like a big tough guy. And he's again giving the same opinions that they liked the show. They didn't like the gangland. They didn't like the body horror, part of it, but that he thought that they got a lot of right things done. And he eventually, they're asking him, who he was, and that he had been refusing to identify himself. Finally, he says he's with ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence. That has some interesting significance, and I'll mention that in a minute. But he says, if you'd like, what we can do is we can, give you some actual information that you can put into these scripts if you'll do that for us. That's the exchange. If we give you this information, we'd like you to put it in the scripts. He says, well, Zabel says, well, if I did that, I'd have to go back to my writers and have them rewrite stuff. And he said, I don't know that that's really fair to them. And also it's going to cost me extra money because I have to pay for rewrites. And I said, well, will you at least consider it? And they're like going back and forth for like about an hour. And finally, they asked him to do something that they just refused to do. They wanted them to meet with a third party who they wouldn't identify, but they said was also a member of ONI. They wanted them to meet in a graveyard at midnight. And he and Friedman looked at each other like, can we have a moment alone? And they said, yeah, fine. Said, we're not going to any graveyard at midnight. What's going to happen? They're going to have to be two open phrases and they're going to shoot us and push them in. He said, no, we're not doing that. This is off. So they didn't take this deal, and they told the guys basically to go away, this JC and this guy, the captain. Didn't hear from him again. So I went ahead and produced the show. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I think you should watch it. They are available on YouTube, though the quality of the copies is really not very good. They are available on DVD. They are not as yet on Blu-ray, and I understand that the reason for that has to do with music licensing rights. There's a lot of original music in this. Like there's an episode where they do the Beatles appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they use the actual Beatles songs that they sang, or Money, which of course is not actually a Beatles song, but I think Do You Want to Know a Secret? And they didn't, use cover version. They used the actual song. They did this throughout the whole series. If they were playing a song on the radio, it was the real song. Like if they were playing a Frank Sinatra song, it was really a Frank Sinatra song. Frankie Valli, I heard a Frankie Valli song in there too, and some Doors and things. So the music licensing rights are quite extensive, and apparently they are having some difficulties legally getting the rights to them to put onto a Blu-ray. But there is a DVD which is supposedly, it has all the episodes, including something that goes back to what I told you about the pilot. I told you they had to do these reshoots. Well, apparently they didn't know it, but somebody saved a copy of their original pilot without the reshoots to send over to the international market. And this is known as the international cut. And the international cut still exists, and it's on the DVD, along with some commentaries and sort of a reunion between Eric Close and Megan Ward, and I think J.T. Walsh is on it too, and they do some commentary and commentaries with the creators, Bryce Zabel and Brent Friedman do commentaries. They also show you the original pitch for the series and a pitch for season 2, which unfortunately was never produced. So allegedly that's a really nice copy and quality, and it has all these great extras on it, an isolated soundtrack and everything. The opening song won I believe, not a Grammy, Emmy Award for Best Opening Music. Didn't win anything else. Again, comparing it to The X-Files isn't really an apt comparison, because what they do instead of... The X-Files was pretty much fictional. All the events that happen in it are fictional events. They're not based on real events. That's not the same. In Dark Skies, the things are based on real events, and you could look at it as an alternate history, because each of the things that happened is something that really happened. Like they cover the Good Friday earthquake, which happened in Alaska in 1967, and they have an alternate reason why that happened, and some things go on around it, which again I'm not going to spoil for you. But and they do that with a lot of the Kennedy, even the Kennedy assassination and Robert F. Kennedy's assassination, and some of the civil rights things, the Watts riot, Vietnam War. They blend in a lot of the current, cultural events. And the tagline to this, it was supposed to be "History is a lie." Instead, it's "History as we know it is a lie." So they're telling you that these historical events did take place, but there were other things behind it, and it was usually the hive. One thing that I noticed, which I thought was really funny, and I'm 100% certain this was intentional, in the episode Hostile Convergence, there's a kind of a baddie character. It has to be a baddie, and this is a character known as Jim Steele, a rather silly macho name, but played by Tim Kelleher, who was really wonderful as the bad guy. And there's a scene where he's stalking through Kim's house looking for her, and he's got a silenced 45 that he's carrying, and you see the pinky of his right hand, and it's bent like this, and he can't move it. That is a direct reference to the Invaders. The tell of how you could tell somebody was an invader was they had a bent pinky finger. And I'm absolutely 100% certain Bryce Zabel put that in on purpose as a reference, because again, the themes are very similar. There's a crusader who, in this case, is John Lowengarde, played by Eric Close, and Megan Ward is his companion, and they're going up against people who don't really believe that UFOs are real or that there is this invasion. And then you've got the other side, which is MJ-12, and Lowengarde breaks away from MJ-12, and now he's sort of in an adversarial position, and so he's got basically two enemies. He's got the Hive, who are basically out to destroy all humanity, and then MJ-12, who are out to stop the Hive, but they also have their own sort of covert agenda, which is not always a positive thing, which is just to keep the UFO secret from ever being revealed to the public. Bryce Zabel has written a book called AD After Disclosure, which is not about UFO disclosure. It's about what would happen if it was disclosed that we're not alone. This is real. This is really happening, and it's not fiction. There are aliens. They have been coming here, etc., etc. Obviously, that's kind of a controversial subject, as not everybody believes it. I'm not entirely certain I do myself. I'm sort of on the fence. I have seen a UFO, but I cannot say for certain that it was an extraterrestrial craft. All I know is what it wasn't. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't a rocket. It wasn't a balloon. It wasn't a kite. It wasn't the planet Venus. It was something. It was a structured craft that did not look like anything I'd ever seen. But anyway, getting back to the series, I said I was going to say what the link with ONI is. The Office of Naval Intelligence are the people who received the first reports of what became known as the Philadelphia experiment. They were implicated, I should say, in the Philadelphia experiment by the guy who wrote these letters to a ufologist named Morris K. Jessup. And the guy called himself Carlos Meredith Allende. Letters, in truth, his name was Carl Meredith Allen, and he was a famous liar. So I don't think anything that was really written down in the... Basically, what I think happened, in truth, is that Allen was, in fact, a merchant seaman, as he claimed, in World War II, and he did, in fact, serve upon a vessel called the Andrew Furuseth, and he probably heard rumors of a quote-unquote magnetic field being put around a ship. What that was for was something called degaussing. What degaussing was, they ran copper wires around the outside of destroyers, and they would run an electrical current through it to make the ship invisible to magnetic mines. Not physically invisible, but invisible to magnetic mines, which worked. they could go through a minefield and they wouldn't set off the German mines. And I think that got parlayed into the mind of this person as a real experiment with physical invisibility, which, as far as I know, and I've done quite a bit of research, it did not ever take place. But ONI was implicated in that. It was supposedly under the auspices of the Office of Naval Intelligence, which would have made sense if it was real, but I don't really believe it was. Anyway, Dark Skies from 1996-97 is definitely worth watching, and I highly recommend it.